Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to talk to you tonight about something that should concern every person who values peace, stability, and the truth about what's really happening in our world. The headlines tell us that NATO is on high alert, that there's a rapidly escalating crisis, that we're living through dangerous times. But here's the question nobody in the mainstream media seems willing to ask. How did we get here? And more importantly, who benefits from this perpetual state of crisis? Let me be clear from the outset. I'm not here to defend any government, Russian, American, or otherwise. I'm here as an economist, as someone who has spent decades studying how economic systems shape political decisions, and I'm here to tell you that this crisis we're witnessing, this so-called high alert status, is not some inevitable collision of civilizations. It's the predictable outcome of decisions made by people with very specific economic interests. Now, you've probably heard that Russia is the aggressor, that Putin is the new Hitler, that NATO is simply defending democracy and freedom. But let me ask you something. When Finland and Sweden joined NATO recently, bringing the alliance right up to Russia's borders, did anyone stop to think how the United States would react if Russia or China formed a military alliance with Mexico and Canada? Would we call that defensive? Of course not. We'd call it an existential threat. And yet, when we do the exact same thing to Russia, we're shocked, I tell you, when they respond with alarm. The military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about in 1961 is alive and thriving, my friends. And nothing feeds that beast quite like tension, conflict, and the perpetual threat of war. Let me give you some numbers that the evening news won't share. Poland just accused Russia of state terrorism over a rail explosion, tensions that emerged just days ago. Russian forces have made significant territorial gains in Ukraine throughout 2025, advancing hundreds of square miles while deploying over 170,000 troops. NATO has conducted crisis management exercises throughout the year, preparing for hybrid warfare scenarios. Former NATO commander is demanding that the alliance abandon its relaxed defense posture and move to an alert status with rules of engagement allowing preemptive action. Does any of this sound like de-escalation to you? Does any of this sound like a genuine pursuit of peace? Here's what's really happening, and this is where my analysis as an economist becomes crucial. The war in Ukraine has been extraordinarily profitable for certain sectors of the American and European economies. Defense contractors are recording record profits. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, these companies have seen their stock prices soar. The United States has committed over $100 billion in aid to Ukraine, much of which circles right back into the American defense industry. European nations are ramping up military spending, with Turkey alone announcing a $47 billion military budget, its highest ever. This isn't just about geopolitics. This is about economics. This is about capitalism doing what capitalism does best, turning crisis into profit, turning fear into contracts, turning human suffering into shareholder value. And let's talk about NATO expansion, because this is absolutely central to understanding the current crisis. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has expanded relentlessly eastward, breaking promises made to Soviet leadership that the alliance would not move 1 inch eastward. If Germany reunified, today NATO has 32 members, including former Soviet states and Warsaw Pact nations. From Russia's perspective, and I'm speaking analytically here, not ideologically, this looks like encirclement. This looks like a strategic noose tightening around their borders. Now, Ukraine finds itself in a devastating position. The country has suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties. Its energy infrastructure has been systematically destroyed. with 80% of thermal generation capacity knocked offline. Millions have been displaced, cities have been reduced to rubble, and the fighting continues, with Russian forces intensifying operations around strategic cities like Pokrovsk, which could become the largest city captured since Bakhmut. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drone strikes have targeted Russian oil refineries and energy infrastructure, exposing economic vulnerabilities, but also escalating the conflict to new and dangerous levels. What troubles me most, and what should trouble all of us, is that there seems to be no genuine diplomatic effort to end this catastrophe. Peace negotiations collapsed in October when Trump's proposed some. It fell apart. Russia demands maximalist concessions, Ukraine refuses to cede territory, and the West continues to pour weapons into the conflict while ruling out direct military intervention. This is a recipe for endless war, a frozen conflict that could drag on for years, consuming lives and resources while enriching defense contractors and expanding NATO's footprint. Here's the uncomfortable truth that we need to confront. The United States and NATO are not primarily motivated by concern for Ukrainian democracy or sovereignty. If we were, we would have prioritized diplomacy over militarization. We would have pursued a negotiated settlement that acknowledged legitimate security concerns on all sides. Instead, we've chosen a path that weakens Russia strategically, tests new weapons systems in real combat conditions, expands NATO's reach, and generates enormous profits for the military. Industrial complex. Ukraine has become a proxy battlefield in a larger geopolitical chess game, and the Ukrainian people are paying the price. The experts tell us NATO is on high alert because Russia is dangerous and unpredictable, but let me offer you a different analysis. NATO is on high alert because that serves the interests of powerful economic and political forces that profit from perpetual tension and conflict. The crisis is rapidly escalating not because it has to, but because escalation serves specific interests, corporate interests, political interests, and strategic interests that have nothing to do with the security and well-being of ordinary people, whether they live in Ukraine, Russia, the United States, or anywhere else. Think about what this means for our future. Every dollar spent on weapons is a dollar not spent on health care, education, infrastructure, or addressing climate change. Every escalation of this conflict increases the risk of a wider war, potentially involving nuclear weapons. Every day this continues, more people die, more families are destroyed, and the prospects for genuine peace recede further into the distance. What's the alternative? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not more weapons shipments. It's not expanding NATO further. It's not ratcheting up sanctions that hurt ordinary Russians while doing little to change Putin's calculations. The alternative is serious, sustained diplomatic engagement that acknowledges the legitimate security concerns of all parties. The alternative is a negotiated settlement that may require compromise and concessions from everyone involved. The alternative is choosing peace over profit, cooperation over confrontation, and the welfare of ordinary people over the interests of defense contractors and geopolitical strategists. But here's the problem, and this brings us back to the economic system I've spent my career analyzing. Capitalism, particularly in its current neoliberal form, is structurally predisposed toward conflict and crisis. Competition for markets, resources, and strategic advantage drives nations toward confrontation. The concentration of wealth and power in corporate hands means that policy decisions reflect elite interests rather than popular welfare. The military-industrial complex operates as a massive wealth extraction machine, transferring public resources into private profits while leaving ordinary taxpayers to foot the bill and ordinary soldiers to fight the wars. Until we confront this fundamental reality, until we understand that the crisis we're experiencing is not an aberration but a feature of the system we live under, we'll continue to lurch from one conflict to another, from one crisis to the next. NATO will remain on high alert because staying on high alert is profitable and politically useful for those in power. The crisis will continue to escalate because escalation serves the interests of those who benefit from war and preparation for war. So what can we do? We can start by telling the truth about what's happening and why. We can demand that our elected representatives prioritize peace and diplomacy over militarization and confrontation. We can challenge the narrative that presents endless military spending as necessary and inevitable. We can build movements that connect the struggle for peace with the struggle for economic justice, recognizing that these are not separate issues but different aspects of the same fundamental challenge, creating a society that serves human needs rather than corporate profits. The current crisis is serious, make no mistake. The risk of wider war is real. The human suffering is immense. But the solution is not more of what got us here. The solution is not more NATO expansion, more weapons, more sanctions, more confrontation. The solution is a fundamental rethinking of our priorities, our policies, and ultimately our economic system itself. I want to close with this thought. History will not judge us kindly if we allow this crisis to escalate into a wider war that could have been prevented through diplomatic engagement and genuine compromise. The experts warning us about the rapidly escalating crisis are right to be concerned, but they're often wrong about the causes and the solutions. The cause is not Russian aggression in isolation. The cause is a global system that privileges profit over peace, corporate interests over human welfare, and military solutions over diplomatic ones. And the solution, the real solution, requires us to challenge that system at its roots. We have a choice to make, all of us. We can accept the official narrative, support the endless militarization, and hope that somehow this all works out without catastrophic consequences. Or we can demand something different. We can demand peace. We can demand diplomacy. We can demand an economic and political system that prioritizes human life over corporate profit. The choice ultimately is ours, but we need to make it soon because the clock is ticking, the crisis is escalating, and the consequences of choosing wrongly could be devastating beyond measure. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope you'll think critically about what I've shared tonight, do your own research, and most importantly, demand better from your leaders and from the system that claims to represent your interests. Because if we don't, if we simply accept what we're told and go along with the program, we may wake up one day to find that the crisis we were warned about has become a catastrophe we can no longer prevent. The time for complacency is over. The time for critical thinking and active engagement is now. Thank you.